You're ready to go.
Awesome. Thanks, Pam. Welcome, everybody, to Double Edge Brewing Company. My name is Zac Williams. I'm the head brewer here. We are, just so you know where we're speaking from, we're located right in the heart of historic downtown Lancaster. We are on Chestnut Street, the corner of Chestnut and Columbus. So if you know where the Keller Market House is or the Lancaster Farmers Market, if you're at those places and you look across Chestnut Street, you'll see us. That's right where we are. I'm going to talk today a little bit about the history of brewing in Lancaster, a topic I find pretty interesting. I'll tell you about our story, how we got started, and then we'll take a tour of the tap room, and we'll go in the back, and we'll take a look at the brewery and go through how we make a batch of beer. So we've been here, I guess, and real quick, like Pam said, feel free to interrupt. I like to answer questions kind of as we go. If there's anything that needs clarification, please speak up. So we've been here since March of 2018. That's when we opened. March 24th, I believe, was our grand opening. And before we opened, there was a 75-year gap where there were no breweries in the city of Lancaster. The last brewery that was here in downtown was the Lancaster Brewing Company that was located on the corner of Forest Rose and Union Street. The Lancaster Brewing Company shut down, I believe, in 1941. They were kind of the mid-30s to early 40s. And they were the last one until we opened. They occupied a building that was a brewery clear back in the 1860s. If you know Uck's Fruit Farm on, I believe, 188, there's a big orchard out there. The brewery that started in the 1860s was started by the Uck's family. So Christian and George Uck started the brewery there. When they built it, it was Memorial Drive was a canal at that time. So they built the brewery right on the canal. It's called the Lancaster Lateral Canal. And that brewery was, changed ownership a few times throughout the years. Eventually, in the late 1800s, it became known as the E. Becker Brewing Company. And if you go to some antique stores around, you'll still see occasionally some E. Becker bottles. It's a brown glass bottle that says E. Becker Brewing Lancaster O. And that was here, one of the many breweries that was in Lancaster throughout the years. They were, like a lot of citizens back in the early 1800s, German immigrants. So Mr. Becker was from Germany, and he brewed what was called Bismarck beer. So it was a German lager, and he named it after Otto von Bismarck, which was the German chancellor in the late 19th century, I guess, in Germany. So very proud Germans, and they made some pretty fantastic, by all accounts, German lager. The E. Becker Brewing Company closed down right about the time World War I started. And what's interesting about that business is because they made lagers ferment cooler, they ferment cold. So they had to find a way to cool these beers while they were fermenting and aging them. So they had the capacity to create ice. So when the brewery shut down in the early 1900s, until they reopened again as a Lancaster Brewing Company in the 30s, they were, I believe, known as the Crystal Ice Company. That was at least one of the names of the business, and they made ice there. It was brewing historically was a big part of everyday life here in Lancaster. There were a significant portion of the town was devoted to growing hops to support these businesses. So if you know, Madison Avenue was not the original name of that street. It was originally called Hop Street. It ran right down the middle of the hop yards in town. They ran from Mount Pleasant over to, I forget the other road. But it was a big, you're talking 8 or 9 city blocks of just hops. They since changed the name to Madison. 6th Avenue was once called German Street, I believe. So there was a lot of German influence back then. And brewing was a big part of everyday life and a pretty big industry for a long period of time. And we are pretty humbled and blessed to be able to carry on that tradition of brewing beer right here in downtown Lancaster. So my business partner, Mark Jenkins, we are not German brewing immigrants. We are software guys by trade. So I graduated from Ohio University. I grew up here in Lancaster, graduated from Lancaster High School, went to OU, have a degree in special education, and I went to work at a software company as a support tech. I ended up moving into development and became an analyst and designer. And I got to know Mark, and Mark was the lead architect there. He still is a software architect. and we became friends. And in 2011, our small software company was acquired by a global firm, and all the creative, fun stuff that we used to do kind of went by the wayside. So Mark and I turned all of our creative energies towards brewing. All the free time we had in the office was talking about beer we've tried, beer we wanted to make, new equipment, processes, techniques. It became an obsession. And eventually in 2014, I remember the meeting and where I was sitting, Mark sent me a message saying, "Do you really want to start a brewery?" And as emphatically as I could hit yes on the keyboard, I did. We ended up going to Weasel Boys later that week, which is a brewery in Zanesville, Ohio, and we kind of listed out some things we thought we needed to do to start a brewery. I don't know if any of that ever happened, but we did it, and 3.5 some odd years later, we were able to open Double Edge Brewing Company here in Lancaster, and we knew we wanted to be downtown. Downtown was kind of going through a revitalization at the time. It still is. But from the onset, we were really kind of blown away by the support we received from the community. And we wouldn't be open if it wasn't for people like, David Scheffler when he was part of DDO, Amanda and Brian Everett, Dan Singer, Travis Markwood. I mean, this really was a community effort to bring this brewery together. And we're really happy to be here and be able to do what we love and serve the community that we're a part of. So we have, I don't know if you can see behind me, in our tap room right now, we have 16 beers or 16 taps. Of those 16 at the moment, we have 14 that we make here in-house. So all of our beers that we sell are made here, just back kind of behind me, and we'll go back there and look at the brewery here in a minute. But all the beers that we make, that we sell, are made here. We recently got a license to sell cider and wine. We've got quite a few people with gluten sensitivities, so we do get cider from either West End Cider House in Athens or Mad Moon Cidery in Columbus. Both of those guys make really great cider, and we're happy to carry their stuff here. And we also have wine. We have some Rockside wine and wine from Oak and Brazen, which is a winery in Delaware. And we've kind of created a cool partnership with Keller Market House across the street. They sell wine there, and we've kind of gotten out of sync a little bit since the COVID shutdown and reopening. But our goal is to sell wine by the glass here that you can then walk across the street and buy by the bottle at Keller. Keller has some fantastic wines, some great cheeses. Really, between us and Keller and the beer, the wine, and the cheese, it's like an evening kind of setting. That's my perfect evening. So, step back here with me. I'll kind of show you the tap room. We have right now 50 seats we can accommodate, or 50 people we can accommodate in our tap room, given the new social distancing guidelines. We generally don't have that many people in here because of the way the math works out with seating. Come this way. One of the things we wanted to make sure that was apparent when you walked into the brewery is that we make the beer here. So when you walk in the front door, you can maybe see back here behind me, but we positioned the brew house right in front of a big glass garage door. So you know that the beer that you're drinking here was made right there. And it's a really cool thing to see. And you can look back there and see the bags of grain and know that I'm holding a glass of beer and it was grained 50 feet that way. So the beer's super fresh. And that's something we really strive to do, is provide really fresh beer for people, because that's something that when you're just going to the store and buying stuff out of a can, you don't really know generally what kind of condition it was in and how it got there. So we've got, like I said, 50 seats in here. We do have a pretty significant outdoor space. One of the cool things about being in downtown Lancaster is Lancaster has, they're called DORAs or ORAs. It's a designated outdoor refreshment area. Maybe I got the acronym is correct. I don't know if I used the words the right way, but basically it means that you can take beer or any alcoholic beverage and walk around downtown within this boundary. So the boundary for us is from Memorial Drive up to High Street, and from Walnut behind us over to Wheeling this way. So it's 6 blocks or more, 6 city blocks or more where you can purchase alcohol from a liquor permit holder within that zone, and then walk around outside with a specific cup that was approved by the city. And it's really a great thing. We get folks, a lot of people who come here on the weekends who are down visiting the Hocking Hills, they're driving back up to Columbus or wherever they may be going, and they always Google brewery near me, and they come find us. So we have the really cool we can be someone's first point of contact in Lancaster. They've never been to Lancaster before. They stop by because there's beer here on a Sunday. And we really want to we really want to do what we can to showcase the community. And we have such a cool downtown, so pedestrian friendly. There's a lot of really great stuff to see. And having that ORA and the ability to take these cups and walk around downtown is a huge, huge win for us and for the city, because people get to see what a cool community we have. To that end, we also have, you can look around a little bit. We have a lot of local art on the walls. We need to get more up. Obviously, the COVID shutdown has kind of slowed down a lot of stuff, but we really wanted to showcase local artists and, again, just try to highlight some of the really cool things that we think that this community has to offer. So we'll walk back this way. Are there any, I'll take a pause for questions. Any questions about the brewing history, the tap room, any of that stuff before we go back and talk about beer?
I thought of a question. Like, where did you locate so much of the local history on the brewing and all of that here?
Sure. So it's really not that well documented, sadly. There are a few books. If you go to the Fairfield County section of the library, there's a room in there. There's a one book called A Centennial History of Lancaster, which goes into it quite a bit. Is one book. Charles Goslin, I believe is his name. He used to do an article for the Gazette for many, many years called Crossroads and Fence Corners, I think. He just kind of walked all the roads in Fairfield County and would write about his experience and what used to be there. He has some pretty interesting information. But if you go back, if you just Google Fairfield County history, you'll find a lot of that information. And it's not so much focused on the businesses as it is the people. So Ernest Becker was brother-in-laws with Mr. Midoff in the Midoff Hotel on the corner there. So you kind of have to find the people, and then you can read a little bit about them, and there's just little tidbits about what they did and the businesses they started. So
sounds like you need to write a book.
Say what?
Sounds like you need to write a book.
Oh, not me. But there are a lot of good books out there. It's a pretty fascinating history. If you ever want someone to ramble on at you for 30 minutes about Lancaster brewing history, come to the tap room and find me, because I will bore you to no end with this stuff. I think it's endlessly fascinating, and it's part of our history that we don't really talk a lot about because it's not really that well documented. I mean, there's a lot of breweries that were here that we don't really know the name. I mean, I don't know the name of them yet, but I know they're here because we've seen pictures of them. So there's still a lot more out there to find.
Yeah, I think it's so cool when you talked about the fields of hops being, because it's my neighborhood. So I just can't think about, the streets that are behind my house were just these whole fields of hops. Kind of cool.
Yeah, they had what was called Bucket Row, which was over on at the end of Madison, kind of over close to Mount Pleasant. They had like a well there, and they called them shanties in the book. And it was where the itinerant workers would come at the end of the day from picking hops and fill their buckets with fresh water and go back to their homes with their bucket of water and rest for the night before they got up and picked hops the next day. It's a really cool history. It was the Hocking Valley Hop Company that owned the hop yards, and Darius Talmadge was the owner of that. I'm sure everybody knows Mr. Talmadge. He was at least at one point, was the owner of the hop fields. And again, Mr. Goslin in the Crossroads and Fence Corners books, you can find those at the library for sure. I've checked them out before. They have multiple copies. He mentions walking down Madison Avenue in the 60s, and you could still see along some of the alleyways, along the barns and fences, some of the old hop vines were still climbing.
Yeah.
They were still there. So from 100 years before that, they were making beer with those, and now it's just kind of a remnant. I don't know if any of those hops have survived today, but for a while they were still there.
So did you mention the name Double Edge, how you came up with that? Did I just miss that, or?
You didn't miss it.
Okay.
We say Double Edge for us is kind of, it speaks to kind of our dual mission statement. One of them is to provide fresh beer to the community, because that's something that I think it's a recent thing that people have access to fresh beer. I was just at a store in town this week, and I saw beer on the shelf that was over a year old. I know that because the brewery recently changed their label, and this was last year's beer. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not unsafe to drink, but it's not the experience that the brewer intended you to have when you drink that beer.
Yeah.
So fresh beer is something we really try to strive to give to people. And the other part of that is we want to support our community. So we try to do a lot with supporting local nonprofits. I know Mark and I are involved with several downtown organizations. And it's something that we feel really honored to be able to do this. I think brewing beers, I don't know, it's a noble profession. We've created a place, we want to create a place where people can come and gather and just be really amongst each other and be part of this community. So that's kind of what the Double Edge means. Does that answer your question?
It totally did. Thank you. All right. I won't hold you up any longer, as long as if nobody else has any other questions. Awesome. Thanks, Zac.
Okay, cool. Yeah, come on back this way. We'll walk back. We'll step into the brewery now, and I'll give you I always wonder when they're doing college tours if they walk backwards, if they ever fall. You're going to see if I do that today. Come on in here. And we are getting ready.
Fall.
There's hoses. So this is what we're doing. We are getting ready tomorrow to brew our Oktoberfest lager, which is called Heritage. So we kind of have hoses and stuff sitting around. I'll give you the quick fermentation 101 or intro to fermentation 101, but beer is made when yeast consume sugar and they make alcohol and CO2. So really all the brewer does is the brewer essentially sets the table for the yeast, and then, in other words, gives them the sugar profile that we want. And then we create an environment where the yeast behave predictably. And then if we treat the yeast well, we keep them healthy, we can reuse yeast from batch to batch. And they're kind of like our little workers. But the yeast do all the work. We just kind of give them the nutrients and the food that they need to do what they are around to do. So this side of the brewery, and the side that you can see when you look in the garage door, is the hot side. So this is where I do all the brewing, where we essentially make the food for the yeast. And then over here is the cold side. This is where we have all the fermenters. Some breweries will call this the cellar, but this is where the yeast do all their fermentation, and we package the beer on this side as well. So a brew day, and I'll walk you through a brew day quickly, and feel free to stop. I tend to go quickly when it comes to this stuff, but we'll come back here. And you guys I'm not going to go into, I won't belabor these points too much. You were just at Combustion a couple weeks ago, and they gave a killer video about the brewing process, and I know Grant was there kind of going through everything. So we don't have that, but I'll kind of hit the high points quickly, and then any questions you guys feel free to ask. So again, due to the COVID shutdown, our brewery has turned into somewhat of a storage facility. So we have a big pallet of growlers that we have to walk around. So apologies for that. But it all starts back here. We get our grain. We actually have the grain shipment coming in today. But our grain comes in usually 50 to 55 pound bags. Most of our grain comes from Germany. So we use a German Pilsner malt as our base malt. And the whole process begins with this machine back here that says Alpha, and that's our mill. And what that does is that crushes the barley and allows us to extract the sugars that are inside. In a typical batch for us, we use between 500 and 800 pounds of grain per batch. So at the beginning, when I said yeast eats sugar, our sugar source in this case is primarily barley. We've used actual sugar. We use honey sometimes, molasses, wheat, oats, corn, rice. Depending on the beer we want to make and the finished character of the beer, that kind of dictates what sugar source we use for the yeast. So it's difficult to see from here, but underneath that mill, there's a kind of a white pipe that comes out, and that is an auger. I'm going to step this way. The auger takes the crushed grain up and drops it into the mash tun. And the mash tun is this tank right here. What the mash tun does is we soak the grain with barley. We soak the barley with water at a very specific temperature to get the sugar profile that we want. So we usually leave it in here for an hour, anywhere between 148 and 156 degrees. So let the naturally occurring enzymes in the barley break down all the starch into sugar. Now, generally, when the barley is planted, that happens, but they use that for fuel for the plant to grow. We are extracting it out so that we can feed it to our yeast. So come on around here and go through the next step. So here's the mash tun. It's kind of I need to clean it a little bit better today, but it's got a false bottom on it. Essentially, the barley husk stays up here, and these have little slots in them, and the sweet wort, as it's called, kind of drains through, and we take that over to the kettle. So if you come around here, you can maybe see a little bit better. We didn't design the brewery to be filmed, so I apologize for that awkward walking here. So this is our mash tun. Over here we have the kettle. On this side, the kettle is where we boil the wort. And at that point, we will add hops, other spices. It's a way to sterilize the wort. It concentrates it and allows us to get those bitter compounds, the bitter acids out of the hops into the wort itself. Once we're done boiling, and we can also add spices too. So we're going to be brewing the next couple weeks, maybe 3 weeks or so, we'll make our pumpkin ale. We use pumpkins from Schultz Valley Farms. We put in that kettle cinnamon, clove, allspice, kind of some pumpkin pie spices. And we do the same thing for our different spices, but our Yule Fool, one of our Christmas ales, we spice the beer when it's in the kettle as well. After we're done boiling, this thing over here, that looks like a radiator on your car, is our heat exchanger. And that's what cools the wort down to, we call it pitching temperature, but to a temperature that is suitable for the yeast. So we run the wort through that, and we run it through these hoses over here into one of our fermenters. And generally we have yeast already in the tank, but we'll run the wort in there, and depending on the style, we can turn our ales around, and ales are just the name we give to styles of beer that ferment warmer. I can turn out an ale in maybe 12 to 14 days. If it's one that requires dry hopping, which is where we add hops to the tank itself, that'll add a few days to the process. And then we have lagers, which ferment colder, and because it ferments colder, the yeast move more slowly, so it takes them a little bit longer to go. Those can take 6, 7, 8 weeks, sometimes depending on the beer itself. But we'll put the beer in the tank with the yeast. And the pipes you see up above, these kind of insulated big white pipes, are our glycol system. It's essentially a refrigerant that keeps the tanks cool or at the temperature we want while it's fermenting. Fermentation is exothermic, so it creates heat. So if we don't keep it cool, the yeast will kind of create a lot of heat, and the beer will get too warm, and we'll get some off flavors or flavors we don't want in the beer. So it's important that we keep the beer at kind of a controlled temperature during the fermentation process. Once the beer is done fermenting, we can take the yeast out and move it to another tank and reuse it. Certain yeast we can do that with, other ones we can't do much with them again after we've already used them. And then we kind of start the process over again. New grain, new beer, and those yeast cells go back at it again. When our beer is done, we can carbonate the beer in these tanks. And then all of our beer right now goes into kegs. So either half-barrel kegs or 6-barrel kegs, and that's a 15-gallon keg or a 5-gallon keg. And we store it in the back until we're ready to take it up front and serve it. We have probably 10 to 12 maybe active accounts around town, kind of beyond that serve our beer. So you'll find our beer not only here in the tap room, but some other places around Lancaster as well. And I think that pretty much sums up the brewing process. Any questions back here about what we have? That was really fast.
Doesn't look like we do.
I have a question.
It does, yeah.
It's actually a lot bigger in there than I've been there before. Do you guys have set hours right now with the COVID, or is it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. So we have, yes, we are closed on Mondays and Tuesdays. We're open Wednesdays and Thursdays from 4 to 10. Fridays from 4 to 11, 10, 11. Is that right? Thank you. I should know this. And then Saturdays we're open noon to 11. And then Sundays it's 2 to 6. So it kind of changes
Awesome.
every day.
And then what's your favorite beer?
Oh my goodness. I am very seasonal. when I drink. So right now I'm drinking a lot of kind of lighter beers. I like session IPAs. Generally speaking, I will take a kind of a German lager over most any style. So a Pilsner, a Helles, those types of things are really what kind of floats my boat. And as far as this building goes, we've got, I think, maybe 3,000 or so square feet in the whole thing. I think maybe 1,500 or so back here in the brewery. This building used to be was a number of things. It was, Joyce Harvey posted an article. She's just like a little history article in the paper every so often. She did one about this building, and it was at one point a bakery. I think it was a flower shop. It was a diner, I believe, in the 80s. It was a garage or filling station. We know that because when we were digging up the floors, we found fuel tanks underground that we had to deal with. It was fun. We also found like a hydraulic lift, like the base of whatever you would use to lift the car up. We found that back here too. So this building's been a lot over the years. It's kind of, if you come in, you'll see that we've got some odd walls in the tap room with thick walls. We tore down everything we could, but the remaining walls are structural and brick. Luckily, we had this large beam in the back that allowed us to open up this space. And that was kind of that was the determining factor when it came to where we were going to put and position the brewery. Back here, here's your question. Seasonal beers are my favorite, but I'll go with a lager most any day.
And then one more question. Do you give tours, like just on random, maybe you already said that, do you give tours to people if they just stop in, or do you have organized tours?
We do give tours. We haven't given tours since we reopened with the COVID crisis going on. So we haven't given tours lately. But under general circumstances, yes. If I'm here, Devin can give a tour too. Mark can give a tour. We will, if we're staffed up front to handle that, we'll gladly bring you back here and show you around, assuming we're not doing anything too crazy with cleaning or brewing or anything like that. But yeah, we will gladly show people around.
Thank you.
Zac, there's
Sure.
a couple questions that have come up. One of them was somebody wanted to know what your carryout options are. Like, what are you selling in size and that kind of thing?
Great question. So right now we have growlers, which are the glass jugs. I'll grab one right here. These are 64 ounces, so half a gallon. We'll sell all of our beers in growlers. We have those here, and we'll also fill growlers if you bring one in from home. Everybody has a lot of these. So if you bring one in, we'll clean it and fill it for you, or we have ones here to sell. And we also have 32-ounce growlers, which is half this size. It's a can. We will fill it and seam it, and you can take that with you when you leave. Both of these last unopened. I mean, I like to tell people to try to consume them within 3 days after they purchase the beer. Once you open it, whether it's the can or the growler, try to consume it all that day. We've had folks leave them in there unopened in a cool place for a week or more, and they say that the beer tastes fine. But yeah, these are kind of short-term storage options for beer. We're considering canning. There's some mobile canning options down the line or around the area that we can take advantage of to can a couple batches of beer in more traditional 12-ounce or 16-ounce cans. So that's something that we're kicking that idea around right now, with to-go beer being such a big segment of our business. It would make sense to have an additional to-go option for people.
Fantastic. Somebody, Tracy, she really likes light beer. So what would you recommend?
Light beer. So I would stick with, when you say light beer, there's a couple, people mean different things. They often mean like a yellow fizzy beer. But we have a couple light beers that are dark. So one of my favorite beers is it's Moondog. It's our porter. So it's less than 5% alcohol. It has a little bit more body than like a Bud Light or something like that, but it's still a light beer. It doesn't fill you up, and you can drink several of them because the ABV is so low. Our best-selling beer is probably our Gold Nail, or our we have three. They're kind of the top sellers. It's our Gold Nail, which is just a light body. It's about 5%, easy to drink. We have our Rustic Sunrise, which is the same Gold Nail infused with coffee from the well. So we go to the well every week, and whatever coffee they have fresh roasted, we bring that back here, and I infuse that into the beer that week. So the Rustic Sunrise, if you come in, it kind of changes from week to week. It's because the coffee that we get is different from week to week. If you stay right there, I'll show you. I've got coffee to make today. This is from Uganda. They have such wonderful writing down there. Ugandan coffee was going to go in this week's Rustic Sunrise. So if you stop down this weekend, you'll be able to try this. Another option we have is Brightside. It's a tangerine wheat. It's kind of a, I don't know, craft beer version of like a Blue Moon. And then we have a couple lagers coming on soon that I think might be of interest to someone who likes light beer.
Yes, Brightside is good. I like that one a lot. If you like a lighter, kind of a fruitier flavor kind of in there as well. Okay, so Jeff would like to know if you have any food options. I know you guys have trucks that come in, if you wanted to touch on those.
Sure.
Anything else?
Yeah, so we do offer, we have soup to sell here, but I would recommend that folks take advantage of our food trucks. So every Friday and Saturday, we have food trucks that come in and they park just outside here alongside the brewery in the parking lot. So if you want to find out which food trucks are coming, check out our Facebook page. We kind of have those for at least the next month. Those events are posted, so you'll know who's going to be here and when they're going to be here. You can get the food and bring it inside and eat it here. You can get the food and eat it outside. You can get the food and go. Really doesn't bother us if you just come and get the food truck and leave. We have such a great relationship with our food trucks. We want them to do well when they're here, so they'll come back. I know we had Mikey's this past weekend. We had a number of folks just stop in, get pizzas, and leave, which is totally fine with me. We want the food trucks to do well. If the food truck does not sound good, or it's not something you're interested in that night, you can always have food delivered. You can bring food in. We've had folks show up with casserole dishes and sit down and have like a family style meal here. So we have a little bit of food, some snacky stuff here to eat. We have candy cottage nuts. We have some popcorn from Crazy for Popcorn. We have some pretzels and stuff like that, chips. But you're more than welcome to bring in food from any place downtown or utilize our food trucks when they're here.
Fantastic. Okay. Also, do you have more to do, or because there's more questions, but you might cover them if you had more.
No, let's go ahead. Let's hit the questions. I think
Okay,
that's kind of what I wanted to cover.
Fantastic. So Carissa had a couple more. She'd like to know about private parties. Do you host those?
We do. We haven't done it much since the COVID reopening, but we have had private parties in here before. We can do it on the days that we're closed or hours that we're closed. I'm here every day, usually doing stuff in the back. So we've talked about hosting. If anybody wanted to come in and have an event during the day, they could do that too because we're here. So yes, private parties are something that we do. We've reserved seating for people too if they don't mind having a get together while other folks are in the tap room. We can save you a section of seats and you can have that for your party if you don't mind sharing the tap room with other guests.
Carissa, you good with that? Awesome. Okay. The other thing she was curious about was about tastings and flights. I bet it's because you had so many intriguing flavors you were talking about, and she wanted to probably try all of them.
Yeah, great question. We do offer flights. A flight is a sampling of beers. So our flights consist of 5-ounce samples. We generally serve them 4 on a board. So you get 4 5-ounce samples of beer. But really, our servers are great. So if you're curious about a beer, ask them what it tastes like. They'll be more than happy to give you the sample just to try it. But yes, flights are an option. We encourage them. I hate to have somebody order a pint of beer and they sit down and they don't like it. They're not happy. That's a kind of current feeling. So I'd rather you take the time to try some beers and get the one you want before you get to a full pint. Does that answer your question? I hope so.
Fantastic. Yeah, I believe so. All right. I believe you've got them all. You did a fantastic job today.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I will say, if you have any questions or want to reach out to us at all, you can always connect with us through Facebook. We have a pretty active on Facebook. All of our events are there. We try to get the messages that come in as soon as we can. But you can always stop in or call us. I think our phone number is on the Facebook page too. We also have an Instagram. We have a Twitter. I don't know if we use it that much, but Facebook and Instagram is kind of where I would point you if you want to find out what's going on here at the brewery. We try to keep that updated, at least with that week's events. It's a pretty current list of what's going on here.
Fantastic. So if nobody has anything else they'd like to ask, or Zach, you don't have anything else you want to share, we can bring it to a close today. It looks like that is the way we're going to go. So speaking of candied nuts, next Thursday, this Thursday, my apologies, the 30th is going to be at Candy Cottage. So we're going to check out what's going on over there. Thank you so much for taking the time to share what you love with us. And this video will be posted to YouTube today. And some of the links, some of the places you discussed today, I'm going to try and include those in the information of the link of the YouTube video. So you can find those there as well. All righty. Thanks everybody for coming today.
Thanks a lot, guys. We appreciate it.
Thank you.